Hello, this is Business Live from the BBC with Aaron Heselhurst and Ben Thompson.
Now, Ben, here we go again. Look, it is a stark choice for Greece. Default on the IMF or default on its own people, as a deal to release more bailout money just seems further away than ever.
Yeah, it is our top story today, Friday, the 17th of April. And markets still really are raising their bets on a Greek default. We'll have all the details for you live. Also coming up in the programme, we'll take a look at why demand for affordable art is now all the rage in Asia. And trade is now well underway on markets across Europe. Those are the numbers now. We'll have the reason why a little later.
Good on you, Ben. And as UK politicians lay out their agenda ahead of the country's general election, we're going to look at the implications for the UK economy. Our economics editor, Robert Peston, we hope, will talk us through what could be the closest election race in a century. And of course, wherever you are, even on the move, just let us know what you think of the stories we're covering and stay in touch with us on social media. Just use the hashtag BBC BizLive.
Hello to you, a very warm welcome to the programme. We are starting in Greece today and its increasingly desperate struggle to avoid defaulting on its debts, and of course that would mean it would be forced out of the euro. Greece is almost out of cash. The EU and IMF have now refused to release any more money until they're satisfied that the economic reform plans of its government are in place. Now, Germany's finance minister warned earlier this week that no one is now expecting a deal. The financial markets are also sadly starting to agree. On Thursday, the interest rate, the yield on Greek three-year bonds, that jumped as high as 28.25%. Now, that is the highest since March of 2012, when a huge debt restructuring saw large amounts of Greek debt written off. Now, the market for credit default swaps, they provide an insurance policy for lenders. They now indicate a 79% chance that Greece won't be able to repay its debts. Now, remember, it's due to pay private bondholders 200 million euros. That's just due in interest. That's due today. It also owes the IMF nearly €1 billion by May the 12th, which could be the final straw. Well, tensions are likely to rise after Greece's finance minister Yanis Varoufakis gave a defiant speech in Washington last night.
Nothing would be easier for me personally. Nothing would be easier for my Prime Minister, Alexis Tsipras. Nothing would be easier for our government than to sign on the dotted line of the existing Memorandum of Understanding, of the existing program. Nothing would be easier than pledging to do as it says, like previous governments ritualistically did, always pledged everything that was asked of them. And in that way to collect 7 billion very quickly and immediately answer the questions that the good people of the financial press are posing full of angst for us regarding our liquidity situation. Except that it would be the wrong thing to do. It would have been the wrong thing to do by our creditors, wrong by our partners, wrong by our people. And when I say our people, I mean not just the people of Greece, but equally every citizen of every member state of the Eurozone. We are one people.
One people, huh? Well, Brenda Kelly is an independent market expert and joins us. So, Brenda, good to see you, of course.
Thank you.
On Biz Live on Friday, Dress Down Friday, by the way, if anybody's wondering, where are the ties? It's
What do you
Dress
think
Down
about
Friday.
Brenda?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, yeah, no. Where's your tie, Brenda? Mr. Varoufakis doing what he does well there.
Yes.
You know, he's sort of, being quite controversial. Look, are we at a point, the choice for Greece now, it seems, either default on the IMF or default on its own people in terms of not being able to pay state salaries, state pensions. They've got to decide which one's going to be the most catastrophic.
Well, we do seem to kind of approach end game with Greece every couple of months, and this does seem to be a little bit more important than most times. And obviously we've had a lot of conversation between the IMF and the Greeks, and of course with regards to Mario Draghi, who he's going to meet later on today. Now, it does seem to be a certain amount of conflict confliction there between the two of them. The IMF have said, and the German Finance Minister, Mr. Schäuble, has said they're free to go and get money wherever else they want if they wish, but they have very little option, and the IMF are not very comfortable with any new extensions on their debt that they might actually ask for. So I think for the time being we've got another deadline for Greece, but again, as you said, it is an option between paying back the IMF or sitting with their mandate, what's expected of the Greek people, and that's what they were voted in for.
Yeah, the German finance minister clearly drawing a line in the sand and saying, look, frankly, you've got to come to the table with this money. We're not going to send any more money. But what's interesting here is he says if you find someone else, whether it's Beijing, in Moscow, in DC, in New York, who will lend you the money, OK, fine, we would be happy. And that's the point, isn't it? They're saying, look, we're not lending, but if you want to go elsewhere and borrow, then by all means.
That's pretty much it. It's pretty much washing its hands off Greece at this particular point in time. If Greece wants to leave the euro, if they want to default on their debt, then that is going to be their own lookout at the end of the day. But obviously the effects in the markets are quite palpable. Yes, we are seeing equity moves a little bit higher. The DAX looks maybe set to fall negative this week. But then if you look at German bond yields, the 10-year is yielding 0.07%. Look at the 3-year on Greek debt, which is about 28%.
Yeah, it is.
So this tells you the divergence of the risk that there is associated with Greek debt and, of course, German debt as well. And at this particular point, as we head towards zero yield, maybe even negative yield on the 10-year Greek debt or German debt, then you do have to question whether or not this is going to end very well.
So, you know, everybody talks about that Europe is more prepared to allow Greece to go. You know, there's no doubt the IMF and Europe can afford to take the Greek losses. But is there another point we have to keep in mind, that a danger perhaps that, you know, if Greece goes, we'll see this kind of divide, this schism, you know, economic schism between the rich north and the stagnating south and east of Europe?
I think that's always been the case. It's always been that contagion factor. And of course, if you set a precedent, if Greece set a precedent in defaulting on their debt and possibly leaving the euro as well, then that could very well lead other peripheral, poorer countries to follow suit.
OK. Well, Brenda Kelly, we'll see you. Well, you're going to be back. You're going to be back probably many times. We'll talk to you very soon. Thank you.
Brenda, thanks very much. I just want to run you through some of the other business stories this Friday, because the oil services giant Schlumberger says it's cutting another 11,000 jobs as lower crude prices continue to hit the industry. The company, which provides drilling technology to firms including ExxonMobil and BP, also reported a 38% fall in quarterly profits.
And the shares, we talked about this story yesterday, but the shares of online craft marketplace Etsy, boy, they soared on their debut on the Nasdaq stock market. In fact, Ben, they were up some 87%, having more than doubled in early trading. It gives the company a market value of almost $4 billion. Etsy, as we some know, founded 10 years ago. It calls itself an antidote to mass manufacturing because it sells handmade and vintage goods, but it has yet to make a
profit. Yeah, keep an eye on that. Look at this. Japan's All Nippon Airways has caught Star Wars fever. God, you could say that. The R2-D2 themed Dreamliner is part of a launch promotion for the sequel Star Wars The Force Awakens. That's due for release in December. The movie is the first episode in the franchise to be released by Disney. It, of course, bought Lucasfilm in 2012 for $4 billion. Just look at that.
Isn't she beautiful? You know we love our planes.
Do you have a favourite character?
Avgeeks.
R2-D2.
No, I'm not that big on, but I have got this.
Yeah, can you stop waving that?
Look at that, look at that. Star Wars fever everywhere, because we're going to look at what's being discussed on social media. And guess what? Yeah, Star Wars, big time. We'll, I don't know where we've got. There we go. Yeah, we're going to talk about this later, aren't we?
Yeah.
Just
the trailer has the power to add billions to the stock market value of Disney. So anticipated is this film that it's managed to release this trailer yesterday. You saw it earlier in the news, but the people are getting so excited for this. Frankly,
are you a fan?
I am.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
Yeah, you're either a Trekkie, a Star Trek, or a Star Wars fan. I'm definitely in the Star Wars camp. I think. How about you?
I haven't seen the last ones.
Yeah, but
I saw the first
really
three.
complicated because the first three.
Or the last three, whatever they. Yeah, all those. Yeah. Hey, look at this. This is on BBC Asia. New Zealand police seize, 123 kilograms of...
You can't say this.
Methamphetamine. There you go, methamphetamine. I got it. My teeth are in. Yeah. That's a big drugs bust. OK, what else we got down here? I just like this photo. I just like this because I met my wife on the tube, but not during rush hour like this. If we were forced in front of MRT doors, like tube doors basically, we'd all have the same reaction.
Yeah, just tell us this story. You met Rachel how?
On the tube.
Yeah, and you were very smooth, weren't you? And you kind of waited on for a couple more stops. Is that how it
Yeah. Moved in 6 weeks later and got married 6 months later. But that was 12 years ago, so it still does work. We've got time. Hey, this one. We were covering this in the earlier shows in the newspapers. Pretty controversial indeed. This is, of course, from satellite images, that China is building a runway on one of those disputed South China Sea islands. Big concrete run. I think about 10,000 feet long that would be able to take fighter jets and civilians.
And it's astonishing. I mean, look at what technology allows you to be able to do now and just build land and reclaim this land from the sea. It's astonishing, isn't it?
It is, indeed.
Clearly in politically sensitive waters, nonetheless.
Yeah.
But let's take you to the region. Let's head over to Singapore, find out what's making news elsewhere in the business world. Leisha Chi is there for us. And we're talking about art fever gripping Asia. Leisha, what's going on?
Well, Ben, art fairs are popping up left and right in Asia, and while we'd all love to have a Picasso hanging on the wall at home, I think it's safe to say that most of us aren't able to afford it. Thankfully, there's now an art fair where paintings and sculptures don't cost $1 gazillion. Instead, everything is priced between $100,000 and $10,000. It's called the Affordable Art Fair and was first started in London and has since made its way to Singapore, Hong Kong, and later this year, Seoul. I spoke to its founder, Will Ramsey, who said he wants to democratize art and make it more accessible to the masses. And that's clearly working because over the past 16 years, the fair has seen art sales of more than $350 million globally. And given Asia's rising middle class, we can only expect those numbers to go even higher.
Leisha, thanks very much. Leisha Chi there in Singapore talking us through art fever that is gripping the region. But one thing that's not gripping the region here is any optimism, frankly, about Greece. There is some evidence that recent rally in European markets is now starting to lose a little momentum. You see there, that's the current the closing figures, of course, for Asia and the US yesterday. But I just want to take you to the European numbers because the DAX yesterday seeing its worst session since the beginning of January. But you might say, even though the arrows aren't looking too great, the rallies really have defied those worries over Greece. Concern now, as we were discussing, building again over that crisis. No deal is imminent. Widespread scepticism that there will be any resolution to that. And as we said at the start of the programme, markets now appear to be gearing up for when a Greek default happens, not if a Greek default happens. So clearly that is starting to be factored into the numbers. So that is the current state of play in Europe. We'll discuss that in a little more detail in a moment. But the big question is what we'll be watching on Wall Street today. Michelle Fleury has the details from the US.
A Greek drama is playing out here in Washington as the IMF and World Bank spring meeting gets underway. Now, Greece's finance minister and the country's creditors are facing lots of questions on whether a debt deal can be reached. In terms of economic data to watch out for, the latest figures on US consumer spending will be watched closely, with inflation still well below the Federal Reserve's 2% target. Economists predict that consumers will have paid more for goods and services in March as the improving economy has allowed companies to charge more. And US consumer confidence is also expected to have gone up from last month. This is a sign household spending in the US may soon strengthen. As for the corporate front, well, to round out the week, General Electric reports how much money it made in the last 3 months.
Michelle Fleury. The lovely Michelle Fleury there from Washington. Brenda's back, I told you. Brenda is coming back. We're going to just look at the wider picture of the markets. I don't know where... Well, let's start with the Asian markets. Ben was just talking and showing us the European markets. But again, I think finishing the week again on gains, still hovering around the 7-year high.
Yes.
What's driving?
Well, certainly I think it's cheap money in the grand scheme of things. It is helping things. And obviously the less risky assets are not offering that great of a yield. So it looks like equities are going to be the winners when it comes to seeking yield for investors. It's a case of cheap money, a lot of quantitative easing taking place. We've got pretty much global deflation. And the only way to look for a certain amount of yield is in a bullish equity market. And that's what we have at the moment.
Are they, just very briefly, we're still with Asia, though, a lot of the investors still hoping for more stimulus from from the likes of China and Japan?
There always seems to be rumours that they were going to get more stimulus from China, and that's what keeps it on the up and up. Like, certainly we are seeing China slowing, but certainly by comparison to the rest of, say, Europe and even the USA, it is pretty much firing on all cylinders, comparatively speaking. But there is always the feeling that if it does see GDP drop anyway below the 7% mark, or even below that again, then we might see some stimulus from the Chinese government, and that is something that a lot of investors are pinning their hopes on.
Okay, Brenda, good stuff. Short and sweet, wasn't it? I told you, short and sweet, but we're going to talk to you with the newspapers, the Biz Buzz.
Yeah, Brenda, thanks very much. Now, still to come after the break, we're going to look at how global trade is really reshaping business for many UK retailers. We'll find out how shoes made in the UK are ending up in China. This is Business Live. Shoes.
Shoes.
My favorite piece is Mahler Fourth. In the symphony, I feel it's extremely pure, therefore it reflects a lot of human emotions. It's quite complex and challenging, and on the other hand, not human at all, I would say more magical. I have a very special connection with this piece because I played it for the first time with the Vienna Philharmonic. And since then, I always connected with it. It will always stay in my mind. Especially the third moment, I find it extremely beautiful and yet very intimate. It's always different because you always feel different as well on stage. I feel inspired. I feel like I touch other people's hearts, but also my own in a way. All of those emotions are nurtured by this wonderful orchestra, and I feel very fortunate to be part of the Vienna Philharmonic.
From the shores of the Caspian Sea, in the ancient land of Azerbaijan, rises the first European Games. Be part of sporting history in Baku this June. The European Games, Baku 2015, rise to the occasion.
Almost 40 years ago, Robert De Niro played one of his most memorable roles in the New York film Taxi Driver. This month, Talking Movies reports on the Tribeca Film Festival, a film event that Robert De Niro co-founded.
I was asked to take a leading role in London's New Year celebrations, and this film tells the story of my preparations for the most important day in the Chinese calendar.
So what I want to do is see what really lies beneath the spectacle and superstition to make this celebration such an important festival for so many people around the world.
It almost feels like you're in the mind of Alexander McQueen, and the music is kind of almost like the thing that kind of tones everything down and keeps everything a little bit peaceful in this very crazy cacophony of kind of madness.
For more on this month's hottest films, fashion, music and arts, go to bbc.com/culture.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching Business Live. Our top story today, it seems increasingly unlikely that Greece will reach an agreement with its international creditors in time for the meeting of Eurozone finance ministers next week. That, of course, raising fears of a Greek default on its debts.
Again?
Once again.
Yeah,
more fears.
It is the saga, isn't it? Okay, let's go and see what some of the other stories that have been talked about on the BBC Business Live page. I pulled this one up. I mean, this is UK story, but you may be seeing it in some other parts. You know, we've seen the big oil drop, right?
Yep.
You know, something like, what, 50% since last year. And we saw prices at the pump drop, which was good, and so they should have, but they've started to go back up again, and we haven't seen a significant rise in oil.
Yep.
I think, I don't know, what is that, $58 a barrel? Still
Yeah, but this
hovering
is the analogy, isn't it? Prices rise like a rocket, fall like a feather.
Exactly. And exactly, you know,
retailers on fire
nothing
again.
in inflation, so people irate. I get irate when at the petrol pump. Greek bonds, I want to go down to here. This is interesting. This is the newspaper review, but don't worry, investment bankers are going to be okay. Front page of the Financial Times. Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, I don't think too many people will be worried, frankly.
You know, they made, when the first 3 months, their quarterly profit, revenue is $2.75 billion. They've increased their staff pay, the compensation, by 11%, nearly $4.5 billion.
So what does this tell us about about whether they're in touch or out of touch with public sentiment? There's
I don't know,
always
it
the big
tells
row,
us
isn't
they're
there,
in the
about
money.
whether-
Yeah, more on Star Wars, talking about that too. You mentioned it, how the trailer can add, you know, a lot of money. $2 billion, in fact, is what it's raised.
Yeah, so highly anticipated is that film. Interesting, of course, not released until, what, December, yet already share prices soaring in anticipation of that release.
Yeah. We're going to have to make a little apology because at the top of the programme I said we've got Robert Peston, our very own economics editor. Little technical problem. Actually, I'm going to say it. This is the first time that he's live camera from his home.
Yeah.
We were going to use that.
Well, the point is he hasn't live camera.
But it hasn't.
from his home, yeah.
Robert, if you're watching, can you turn it on? Just turn it on. That's all you've got to do. That switch. Anyway, listen, on Monday we're going to be speaking to, or you're going to be speaking to Jeff Gravenhorst. He's the boss of the Danish outsourcing company ISS.
Now, you might not have heard of that company, but chances are you'll have used some of its services. It has around 500,000 staff in 50 countries. They do all sorts of things like security and cleaning. It makes it the world's 4th largest employer. So we'll be asking Jeff how he manages to keep such a low profile. And, well, they're considering a London flotation in the spring on the stock market. So do send us your questions. We'll put them to him. Use the hashtag, as always, BBC Biz Live. And he's going to be in the studio, so no technical gremlins. Hopefully will get in the way of that.
You just have to say to him, Varen Gormarai. Varen Gormarai. That's, how are you?
OK.
Yeah.
Learn something every day.
Jeg kan snakke med
Thank
lidt
you.
dansk. Yeah. Now, we all know that trade is global. Yet stuff made on one side of the world finds its way to markets all over, well, certainly on the other side, all around the world. But what does it tell us about the state of those economies?
Well, Japan's recent economic woes, they've sparked worries around the world, but not for the city of Northampton. It's in the middle of England, and it's known for making shoes. Well, the Midlands.
Midlands, we would say,
Middle
but
of
yeah.
England. They're proving a hit in Japan, as Rob Adcock has been finding out for us.
It's often said that the UK is now a place that imports products rather than manufacturing them, but that couldn't be further from the truth when it comes to high-end shoes. The UK footwear industry has for centuries centred on Northampton, and it's shoes made here that end up on feet all over the world. And one of the places where shoes made in the UK hugely popular is right here in Japan. Exporting to the Far East is big business. The British Footwear Association says £20 million worth of shoes went to Japan last year alone. That's up 45% on 2010. This is Isetan. It's a bit like a Japanese version of Harrods. It's the biggest department store in the entire country, and this store alone sells around 3,000 pairs of shoes made in Northampton every single year. This man owns 150 clothing stores right across Japan.
You know, Japanese customer has a very high average knowledge about the production understanding. So because of this, we want to provide the good handmade shoes.
In fact, it's such an important market that this company flew the 6,000 miles to Tokyo to set up a pop-up shop for just 3 days.
The Japanese buyer is the most knowledgeable in the world. They know everything about our product. They know everything about the history of our company. In some cases, they know more than I do.
Around a third of all the footwear made in the UK ends up in Japan, and for some companies, it's even more.
Japan is the most important market for us. Probably 60 to 70% of our trade goes there. It's a growing market for us, and there's more and more people interested in the UK-made stuff because it is so sought after.
But it's not just all about buying the shoes, it's the skills too. This man came to the UK to learn the craft of repairing English shoes.
Business is over 20 years. Now we repaired 3,000 pairs in 1 month now.
That's a lot.
Yeah, too many. But we are happy.
Rob Adcock for the BBC in Tokyo.
Nice shoes. Nice shoes
what are you
indeed.
wearing?
I'm wearing French ones. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the other business. oui. Some of the other stories in the media, online and all that kind of stuff. Brenda's back. Thanks, Brenda. You've been a godsend today. Let's start with WikiLeaks. post-searchable database of Sony email. So another hacking, basically. Is that what we're...
Well, it seems to be the same hacking, but obviously a lot of the stuff the database was actually shut down at the particular time. So WikiLeaks have now opened a searchable database of over 30,000 documents and emails from Sony Pictures because it feels that the public and journalists were not able to look as in-depth as they could.
Yeah, the point is
initially.
WikiLeaks was saying that they all disappeared from public and journalist view before anyone was able to scratch the surface, and that was all the privacy concerns. Pull them all offline, now they're back on, and we can frankly search them and have a real good nosy about what they were talking about.
Precisely.
And what's so interesting, there's a lot of emails involving the White House and the security services, raising questions why Sony would be involved in that sort of thing.
It is rather interesting, and I suppose that pretty much, vindicates WikiLeaks in the sense that maybe we should know about this sort of thing. But Sony are going to fight back, and they are obviously going to try and keep some of this stolen information and fight back against it, probably in the courts. But it's going to be an ongoing story for a while, I would say.
OK, well, let's swiftly move on. Let's talk FT here. If a politician, what do you think about this, Brenda? If a politician breaks a promise, should voters, or should a voter have a legal remedy? Because let's be frank, I have heard, we've all heard, so many promises in this election run-up to
It's very true, and there is obviously a huge difference between a contract that you might have between two people and a politician's promise, in the sense that a contract is legally obliging and there is the offer and acceptance and all the legal ramifications that go with it. But a manifesto from a politician does not have the same legality, and certainly there was a court case, which is the most interesting thing there, where Tony Blair was brought to court, or certainly brought around in legislature, in regards to his promise of a referendum to exit the EU, and of course the court said that they could not interfere with parliamentary sovereignty. So there's no such thing as a broken promise from a politician. They can promise the world, but they don't necessarily have to toe the party line.
What a shame. We don't have thank you for that. We don't have time for Star Wars, because I was going to show Jabba the Hutt. Look, Jabba.
Please put it down.
We've got to go though.
That's it from Business Live
Thanks,
for today. Much more business news had today on BBC World. We'll see you very soon.
Have a great weekend. You have a great weekend. Thank you. Oh.